So everything that our senses can detect, everything that we hear, see, smell, taste, touch, all of that was created by God, right? From the smallest of the molecules uh, to the biggest of the animals, a whale, to the mountains, to the solar system, to our sun, space itself, the land, trees, grass, uh, birds, the fish, you name it. God created all that to include mankind. Now, how he created this world and that our five senses can detect and how he created mankind are different. And then further, how he formed the first man and the first woman is different. And all of those differences help us to understand our purpose here, or our existence, why we even exist in this world. If we can understand God's design, God's initial creation, that tells us so much more than basically anything else. We'll explore all of that after this brief introduction. Real quickly, God, in Genesis 2, verse 7, God formed the first man from dust and breathed life into him. And then later in Genesis 2, verse 22, God took a piece of the man to make the woman. Uh, how men and women were created by God, uh, we'll touch on here in a bit. But first, we need to look at how he created the other living creatures and how that is different than how he created mankind. Genesis chapter 1, verses 20 through 25 tell us how God created the other living creatures. Genesis 1, verses 20 to 25. And God said, "Let the water teem with living creatures, and let birds fly above the earth across the vault of the sky." So God created the great creatures of the sea and every living thing in it, which the water teems and that moves about in it, according to their kinds, and every winged bird according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. God blessed them and said, "Be fruitful and increase in number, and fill the water in the seas, and let the birds increase on the earth." And there was evening and there was morning, the fifth day. And God said, "Let the land produce living creatures according to their kinds, the livestock, the creatures that move along the ground, and the wild animals, each according to its kind." And it was so. God made the wild animals according to their kinds, the livestock according to their kinds, and all the creatures that move along the ground according to their kinds. And God saw that it was good. Following his creation of the living creatures in Genesis 1, verse 26, we see this verse. Then God said, "Let us make mankind in our image, in our likeness, so that they may rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, over the livestock and all the wild animals, and over all the creatures that move along the ground." So mankind was created to rule over the other living creatures that God spoke into existence. Uh, mankind bears God's image, and like God, was created to rule over other things. Um, and then this is affirmed in verses 27 and 28 of Genesis 1, where we read, "So God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. God blessed them and said to them, 'Be fruitful and increase in number. Fill the earth and subdue it.'" Now, instead of speaking the male and female versions of mankind into existence, God formed the two versions of mankind from the physical creation that he spoke into existence. And again, we see this in Genesis 2, verse 7, from the first man. God took dust of this world, formed the man, and then breathed life into the man. For the woman, he took a piece of the man and then made the woman. Now, God's creation of the first man and first woman was different, meaning that he has two different roles for the male and the female version of mankind. The role for the male version of mankind is found in Genesis 2, verses 15 through 20, shortly after he created the man. He took the man, placed him in the garden, and charged him with caring for the garden. Here's those verses. Genesis 2, verses 15 through 20. The Lord God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and take care of it. And the Lord God commanded the man, "You are free to eat from any tree in the garden, but you must not eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, for when you eat from it, you will surely die." The Lord God said, "It is not good for the man to be alone. I will make a helper suitable for him." Now the Lord God had formed out of the ground all the wild animals and all the birds in the sky. He brought them to the man to see what he would name them. And whatever the man called each living creature, that was its name. So the man gave names to all the livestock, the birds in the sky, and all the wild animals. But for Adam, no suitable helper was found. So God's role for men, the first male, men, is to be his representative steward in a portion of his creation. Right? The first male wasn't responsible for the entire earth. He was responsible for the garden in Eden. We see that in Genesis 2, verse 18, that God recognized the man needed a helper. Uh, the Lord God said, "It is not good for the man to be alone. I will make a helper suitable for him." And then, following God's statement of the man's need for a helper, he had the man name all of the animals in the garden. In verses 19 and the first half of 20, it says this: "Now the Lord God formed out of the ground all of the animals and all the birds of the sky. He brought them to the man to see what he would name them. And whatever the man called the living creature, that was its name. So the man gave names to all the livestock, the birds of the sky, and all the wild animals." Now, as the man is naming these animals, two things are going on. The first is that the man is establishing and exercising his authority over the other living creatures. Remember, go back to Genesis 1, verse 26 and 27, where God said mankind would rule over the animals. Well, by the man naming the animals, the man is exercising his authority, God-given authority over the animals. The other thing that's going on is the man had to have recognized that the other living creatures, uh, the oxen, uh, the leopards, the dogs, whatever it was, had to recognize that those other living creatures had a male version and a female version of that kind, uh, and the male had to understand that he did not have a female version of himself. So God, uh, not only the man exercises authority, but God lets the man know that he's alone and that that's not good. God had already said that it was not good for the man to be alone. Now the man has to have recognized that he was alone. And then in Genesis 2, the second half of Genesis 2, verse 20, God says, "But for Adam, no helper was found." Two verses later, in verse 22, God makes the woman for the man and brings her to him. Uh, God's role for women is to help the steward uh, manage a portion of God's creation. Uh, our purposes, men and women, our purposes are different, but they are equal. Now, we've already discussed how God created the man to steward the garden and created the woman to help the man. But like the man, the woman was also told to rule over the other living creatures in Genesis 1:26. Both the man and the woman are responsible for the care and protection of the world that God created. Additionally, God charged both the man and the woman to be fruitful and multiply in Genesis 1, verse 28. Um, Skip ahead to Genesis 2, verses 22. God didn't create the woman, He made the woman from a portion of the man. Now, English translations tell us that He uh, and according to Hebrew studies organizations, some of the organizations out there, their stance is that the word Selah can mean rib, and it does mean rib, but it is used more as side. It is more translated as the side of something. We see this in Exodus 25, verse 12, where it says the side of the Ark of the Covenant, or in 2 Samuel 16, verse 13, where it says, talks about the side of a hill. In other words, uh, if they're correct in saying that the accurate English translation should be the side of instead of the rib, what this means is that God took the first man and then took a side of that man to make the woman and left one side male and made the other side female. In other words, uh, split the first representative of mankind in half, and one side is male, one side is female. The side that's male, God says, you're the steward. The side that's female, you help the steward. Now let's talk about what it means to help uh, someone like that. Um, there have been times when I was someone's assistant, where my job was to make sure that the person I was assisting was successful in their task. There's times when I've been the leader and I had an assistant. Well, my assistant's job was to make sure that I was successful in whatever task I had. It was a joint venture. When I was the assistant, I felt just as responsible for whether or not the thing, whatever we were doing, was successful or not. When I was the lead, it was always a team effort. We made sure that things were successful. Now, if things went wrong when I was the leader, I was the one answering the mail on that. That's really the difference in my mind, to be the steward or the helper of the steward. When things go badly, the steward gets to answer the mail on that. But I like the way the Hebrew studies organizations that say that it took the side of the first man or half of the man to form the woman, to make the woman, because it a man needs a woman to fulfill what God told them to do in Genesis 1, verse 28, which is to be fruitful and multiply. Likewise, a woman needs a man to fulfill the command that God gave them in Genesis 1, verse 28. Additionally, what that tells us is that in order for a man to fully bear the image of God, he needs a woman in order to fully bear the image of God. And likewise, a woman needs a man to fully bear the image of God. Uh, anyway, so I like the translation of side or half instead of a rib, even though rib is a fine translation. Well, if you've made it this far, go ahead and select the like button. It helps the algorithm, uh, in front of more viewers, that sort of thing. Subscribe if you want to see more videos like this, more content like this. Uh, when you're thinking about the comment section, also leave a comment. And here's what I'd really like to hear from you, or hear your response to this. What does ruling other creatures mean? What does it mean to you? I'm thinking of like different ways that people talk about, we were meant to rule over other creatures, and we were. Well, what does that mean to you? Um, Also, if you'd like to have a biblically substantiated discussion on what it means to be a man of God, consider ordering your copy of the Disciple Warriors Handbook. You can find it on Amazon or Barnes and Noble. Uh, for other videos like this, check out this next Discipled Warriors video for more content like this. My name is Ray Dillman, and I steward the Discipled Warriors ministry. As always, be the man that God created you to be.